Start video.
There it is. Boom. Ha-
Classic.
Have you ever done this before?
Done Zoom.
What, you haven't?
I've never done I haven't downloaded the program or anything. I've only ever done, I guess, FaceTime and maybe like Skype back in the day.
Good for you. Way to avoid it, man.
Is it something I should avoid?
If you can avoid any modern technology, I feel like you're somehow ahead of the game by being backwards.
I'm so on that one. I was so hesitant. I think I said to you I just got internet like maybe a month ago now, 2 months ago, and it was just like I was so against it. But my girlfriend was like, "I need it. Like we need to be able to like do things at the house," and I was just like, "Urgh," like I don't know, letting them in or whatever to my little abode.
So the question is, has your life gotten better or worse with internet in the house?
Kind of gotten, I don't know, it's kind of gotten better, but I'm sure it's taken a toll in like ways that I don't know about yet. You
That's
know,
the thing. They're going to sneak up on you. 5 years will go by and you'll look back and realize you're all anxious and you have stress. You're losing your hair. It's all
yeah,
going to
it's
be
like
related to the internet.
yeah, something like that.
How's it? I mean, this is actually in my notes, but it's related to what we're talking about, which is how's it working out for you only emailing 1 day a week?
That's been a conscious thing since like probably since I've like properly moved down to my house, and it's actually working out. As long as I sort of in the initial email, like I'll sort of let them know that the customer, and then or the person or whatever, and I'm just like, look, I'm pretty busy with the boards or whatever. I'm going trying to do 1 day a week on email. People have been all right with it. I
Do you
think, yeah.
do you think you've lost business because of it?
Um, well, in saying that, like it's like one email a week, but most of my stuff comes through Instagram now. So it's like I'll get to them on Instagram and be like, send me an email. I'm on there once a week, but like let's start the conversation. So
Gotcha.
it's it's sort of this like two-tier way of contacting, but yeah, I mean probably lost business, but it's I don't know. If they really want to get to me, it's possible, and it's good. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's kind of got this nice slow filter on it, like a slow water filter or something.
I guess, yeah, I guess so. I mean, honestly, losing a little bit of business isn't the end of the world either. Like I think
Yeah,
that's kind of baked into my mentality is I'm so grateful for any little bit of business that I'd feel bad if I lost it. But you could chase that endlessly and it really does erode your lifestyle, the quality of life.
yeah, and you can't do it all,
You
especially it's
can't.
just I'm just pretty much a one man band, so it's like yeah, that's as much as I can do, and if that's not enough for some people, then that's someone else can fill that role, That's sort of how I feel about it.
Good. Yeah, that
Yeah,
sounds healthy.
yeah, I'm trying to be because it's been a roller coaster over the last couple of years, so I'm just trying to equal out. I feel like.
What's your roller coaster looked like? It seems like your business is boomed.
Yeah, it's been people say that, or I don't know, it's been steady, and it's sort of like I feel like still acclimatizing to almost like the whiplash effect of even COVID boom, that sort of
Mhm.
like dramatic growth or whatever, or not even growth, just like I don't know, making lots of people buying boards,
Yeah.
and then trying to not bite off too much and trying to like facilitate my life, and then just sort of settling into I bought a house and tried to building a little studio out at the moment to work from home, and just sort of this like I don't know recorrection in my life a little bit. So it's just been, yeah, I feel like I'm still, I mean, that couple years just sort of shook everything up so much. I still feel like it's reverbing around in like real subtleties within my business or my life or whatever. So just sort of like being aware of that, and then just seeing where the lag is or where my productivity is versus out there hustling myself or whatever you got to do these days. So just trying to take a step back and just look at everything sort of settle down. I imagine I see.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
yeah.
as it relates to board sales, you referred to it, but during COVID, virtually every board builder on the planet saw a big spike in sales. But in the last 9 months, we're seeing kind of a real major reset. And in America, and you could speak to what's going on in Australia, but in America, everybody is down, and like in a scary way, because there were
Yeah.
segments of the market that would be down at any given time, but then there'd be other segments that would kind of buoy it. This is the first time that I've ever seen where every segment of the market is down. And a lot of people, the unfortunate thing is a lot of people kind of used the COVID boom to expand their business. And so now they have higher expenses than they ever had before and less business than they even had before COVID. But what are you experiencing?
Um, I was, I feel like in a weird way, I've been buffered by that a little bit, um, purely just because I'm hand shaping and doing majority myself. It almost like put a lag on what I could produce. So I couldn't, jump in and be like, I'm going from 2 boards a week to 20 boards a week, like physically. So it put this sort of, it put work on me, but in a way where I'm just like, I can't do that, physically with my one arm. So, and I didn't go out and get things scanned in and try and meet a demand, which was probably there for a fleeting moment.
Mhm.
So it kind of put this like natural lag throughout my business of just being like, I don't know, maybe that sort of line where you'd go for sort of like a cottage industry, above, and go up to the next sort of industry. I sort of just couldn't. So I had a lag on orders because I did get a few more, but yeah, I just sort of had to head down and chip through them. So when all it's settled down, like I'm still even catching up on boards, not from back then, but it's just had this roll-on effect, this natural roll-on effect, and luckily people have been, um, I don't know, adhere to that and like that. It takes that time to make the custom boards, so I'm sort of just riding it out now. I feel, but just purely due to like a human capacity lag, it didn't. I didn't go to those extremes where I've seen people go there, where it's just got like they went from 2 to 20 a week and they were like killing it essentially, or what they at the time, and now it's just like, yeah, it's slowed down out here too. The same as America. I feel like it's globalization. Everything's, maybe we experience like a little bit of a different thing because not so southern and northern hemisphere.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's definitely slowed down a bit. But I mean, the water's probably 23 degrees right now. It's probably going to be 27 degrees outside. It feels like summer here and it's August, so it's like by osmosis, I can almost feel it like heating up again from what I see, and summer coming around and Christmas and all that. So yeah, I'm just day to day right now.
Good. Well, I hope that it is just a seasonal thing to a degree. Um, and we're not sure in the US if it is or not. We had a really bad winter for waves, but the snow was great in the mountains. So you could kind of point to that and say, oh, everybody's spending money in the mountains. And a lot of surfboard shapers actually snowboard, Matt Biolis and Chris Christensen and stuff have
Yeah.
cabins up in Mammoth. So everybody's spending time up in the mountains, but and then summer's not been great either. So we can kind of point to those things, but there are still global economic factors that are way outside of our control that we have that are very perilous right now that undoubtedly probably will influence our business too. So we're just not sure which it is.
What about you? How's you the surf Splendor? I mean, since I saw you in 2019,
Yeah, it might have
29,
been. Yeah, I think so.
seems like it's just strength to strength too.
Yes, the answer is I think it has been. Due to a number of different things. One of them is just that like the legacy media continued to give up market share. You know, magazines have continually kind of gone away, and there's even websites that existed, kind of some of those have gone away. And quietly, I've just kind of shown up every week and just did the work every week in and out. And so, not that I'm the last man standing, but I'm one of the people
Yeah.
who's just there generating content, you know?
Yeah. And good content too, quality content,
Thanks.
like in depth, long. Yeah. It's good.
Thanks.
Really got me through a lot. Yeah. It's like when the little blue thing comes up on Spotify or whatever, and there's like a new episode. I'm just like, fuck yeah! Like I spend so much time by myself in the shaking bag, so it's like you can almost rip through content, you know, because you just got
Totally.
your hands on and you can absorb so much. So yeah, it's been
Well, I
on the fun.
appreciate all the support over the years, and that's the other detail for me in terms of like it becoming a business. It is, I was always showing up and doing the work, but in recent years, advertisers have showed up in force, and so there's more revenue associated with the business, but my workload is the same.
Yeah,
And my access to interviewing guests, I used to have to, you know, cold call people and explain what a podcast was and that sort of thing. And now they kind of all know. So my job has just gotten easier, essentially.
yeah.
So that's good.
And you had a
But
family,
what's that?
and you started a family.
Yeah, exactly. So that whole thing's busier. But the reality is I don't feel super secure in it. Even
Yeah,
though, even if you like look at uh, it's been a number of years that I've been doing it at a certain level. So that would quantify or qualify as stable, I think, for a lot of people. But in my brain, I just feel like MySpace went away, or Vine went away, or platforms just shift out from under you. So podcasting could go away. And I just, I don't have the energy to adapt necessarily. Like when TikTok comes around, I'm like, I can't be bothered to try to figure that out and how this applies on there. And people give me advice and they're like, no, honestly, just post on there and it works through this algorithm. You'll have 500,000 followers in no time, you know? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the energy to figure that out. So I'm all in with podcasting. And if it goes away, then I go away with it, essentially.
I'm the same. I reckon that's probably a general consciousness thing because it's like there's TikTok, there's people shaping on there doing tutorials, and I'm like, people are like, oh, you get, and I'm just like, no way. That's like, I'm trying to get out of Instagram. I'm not trying to get on another platform. Like,
I know.
and it's just like, and maybe we're getting older. Like, you're 30. How old are you?
No, I wish. I'm 42.
42. So I'm turning 35 next year. Yeah, you're a bit older than me, but I'm like, no, I'm tapped on my like interaction with the outside world and having to
Yeah.
adapt to some platform. It's just, but maybe that's our generation. And then yeah, the safety thing too. It's just like, yeah, your life gets more complex and dynamic, and then you're like, am I really building boards? Like, is this carrying the ship? You know?
Hmm. Well, so you bought a house, you said.
Yeah. I bought some. I've been working towards it since my sort of 20s, and just grew up in the North Coast, up in near Byron Bay there, and sort of just continually got, I guess, squeezed out. I moved around, traveled a lot, but I continually sort of got squeezed out of that area as it went through a sort of boom or get and turned into a tourist hotspot and whatever. But yeah, finally, like as sort of those interest rates dropped and whatever, and I had, I just sort of like used what I had at the time. Looked all right on paper, like nothing, and then yeah, I was sort of, my dad was looking to downsize as well, so we sort of went in and together and got a little bit of property with a sort of house and a sort of tiny house thing on it. So we went in on that together, and yeah, I'm in the house now, but he's sort of a couple hundred meters away in a little studio, and we're just sort of simplifying everything and yeah, getting our head around a bit more property than we're used to as coastal folk. But it's been, yeah, super interesting process. And
Congrats.
yeah, it feels I mean, it's 2 years now I've had it, so it feels good, but it feels daunting. It feels like I've built something, now I've got to hold on to it, have all these different thoughts that I've had probably my entire life, but I guess that's growing up or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I hear. From everybody I've talked to, they you just level up essentially, like mentally, like whatever you bite off, you're responsible enough to where you're not going to let it go away. And so your brain just starts to operate differently and you figure it out,
Yeah,
and then 5 years down the road, you look back and you go, oh my God, that felt so daunting to me. And now it feels like nothing. And it was just a mental shift, once you commit to it.
100%. And I'm trying to be conscious of that too. Like it feels like this young and old on either side of my shoulder sometimes, where it's like, fuck this off. Like I just want to get back on the road and travel. And it's like, keep the business going. Like let's work on this. You're building something that'll sustain you, and you can continue your craft. Like I have these two little like devil and angel things going
Yeah.
on. It's been
Well,
fun. It's interesting.
speaking of Byron Bay, do you feel out of place there at this point?
Yeah, for sure. I go back. My mother still lives there in the house that we grew up in, um, and she like I love going back to see her, but driving and the intensity of that place and like just how many people are in there square, by square meter, even in some of the areas, the cars are parked everywhere and developments going through the roof and that. It's definitely like antagonizes me a bit, but it's like I'm not hung up on it. It's just what the West does to beautiful places these days. So it's just like yeah, it's definitely changed, but there's still little gems there, and I'll still always feel like a certain connection to there, but I don't necessarily want anything to do with it anymore, other than like going to see my mum.
Yeah. Um, I know that you discovered shaping through your father, but do you know how he discovered shaping?
Yeah, so he's got an interesting story actually. He was always around the beaches in Sydney. He grew up in um, Bondi and then over in Maroubra in the '60s. He's in he's 70 next year, and he was born in 1954. So he sort of was just basically like a really young beach boy from early on down there, just running down, and um, he's got stories of like riding old cool lights at Bondi and standing up on the blow up mats and stuff, in the early '60s and watching all the guys, of that generation that were down there. And he basically was into, it's so weird. He was like into board building since he was, I don't know, I think he was like 12 or something like that, 10 or 12, maybe even younger. And his mum gave him like this book on like boating and like
Hmm.
boating repair and stuff like that. And he like figured out that like how to laminate like a little wooden fin onto his cool light when he was like 10 years old and looked like a D fin on a, yeah. So he was just into it from so long, and he eventually started shaping in his garage under a label he had called Gull Surfboards, Gull. And they had a little garage in Coogee, and then he went on to, yeah, he was in the Sydney surf scene through sort of the early '70s on the eastern suburbs, and then he sort of was like wanted to go to Hawaii like a lot of guys of that era and sort of refine his shaping. And he went over there and lived for about 3 or 4 years, and he did some shaping under HIC when they were in town. Um, and yeah, he did a lot of boards over there and kind of like honed his skills as a shaper. Um, and then he sort of came back early '80s and started to work. He came back, moved out of Sydney a little further north up to the Central Coast, and he originally went into one of the surfboard factories there that was pretty well known for the time, Nirvana Surfboards. They had like Mark Sainsbury and Ross Clark Jones and a lot of good Central Coast guys. There was a lot of like innovation coming out of that time, and he basically went in there to make a couple of boards for himself. And he did like four in a day, like production style. just got in there, hired a bay, and the guy at the time, Bill Celia, was like, what you just did 4 in a day, you know, like I'm doing sort of a couple a week, like, and we're busy, do you want to come on? And he sort of went into production through the early 80s all the way till sort of the mid 90s. Yeah, and just doing numbers and working on his own stuff in the background. And he had a few other jobs too. He was a teacher, he's a mathematician, like went to Sydney University, like majored in hydrodynamics. He was a flight attendant for 20 years. He's just done so many different things, but he's always been into boards, and he's always been shaping in the background. And I don't know, drilled it into me how important doing your own dings was when I was young, and it's just always been around us, you know. Like my first sort of memory was going and seeing Dad after work at the shaping bay, you know, after school. We'd just get dropped off there and hang around the factory, and that smell of resin and all that was just so embedded in my childhood because he was in there a lot. And yeah, we're still working on boards now, so he's turning 70 this year, so he claims he doesn't want to have a 70th. He wants to have like a sort of a 60th or a 60th of being involved in like surfboard design. He's super into it.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's his story in a nutshell. And a pretty quick recap, but yeah, he's done thousands of boards, all hand shaped, and is so refined on the planer. And it's just, yeah, even at his age now, he's fit and surfing every day, but he's just a gun on the tool, like you just don't see anymore. So I was really lucky. I was really lucky in that regard.
What kind of boards does he build now?
He actually rides my boards now. It's crazy.
Really?
Yeah, he's he's lighter than me. I'm probably about 74 kilograms at the moment. He's about 68, 70. He's real fit, about 5'10". And he'll sort of ride boards that I was riding maybe 2 or 3 years ago. He'll just ride my older boards. He'll find them and he'll fix them up, and you know, maybe move the fins around them or something, and just ride them to death. So I've got a garage full of them, you know. So he's just sort of, yeah, he really likes that. I think he just sort of gets on them and just does his little tweaks to them. And I want to get him back in the bay. It's probably been 10 years since he shaped himself a board.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's sort of like, he'll get in and do a few passes on my boards, or like do some things and fix up. And sometimes if I'm real busy, like I'll foil, and he'll do some of the fine sanding at the end and little fix ups in the concaves. And he's like just these little Jedi kind of fixes on the end, you know, just to round off edges here and there. So he's shaping and he's thinking about it. He's got his tools there, but he's not. I mean, he did so many. He's kind of semi-retired now. He's surfing in the morning, he's bike riding in the afternoon, he's eating well, and just like living a pretty pretty nice life. But he's keen. He's always thinking about it. It's crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like he's earned it. It's interesting hearing you talk about him being a beast on the tools. When I've read, that's one of the things I remember from reading your Instagram posts is your seemingly love for working with the planer, and the way that you talked about it, or what I remember about you talking about it, is it felt like a meditative state for you.
100%.
Okay, yeah, because I don't hear anybody else talk about it in that way.
Yeah, it's. I've been really conscious of thinking about that too, because it's just coming on. I've had, I guess it's like with meditation, when you learn, it does take X amount of hours to be able to get into that state and drop into that consciousness. But I've had glimmers of it throughout the last 10 or 12 years, 10 years I've been, you know, but nothing that I could sort of repeat or get into as like a proper flow state. And then in the last sort of 2 months being down here, and with the proximity, I built a little shaping bay just in my shed about 50 meters from the house. Being able to sort of get into this routine mentally, and it even sort of starts to reverb in the rest of my life where I'll eat similar things, and then I'll
Mm.
sort of get up at a similar time, and I'll have these like similarity in my actions throughout the day as I drop into going into shaping, and then even listen to similar music and stuff like that. It's sort of, it'll take a board or two or three, and then once I'm sort of get these hours up on the planer and the process stops, there's no stopping and starting, and you sort of get this like dance around the blank where you know where everything is, and you get, it's almost like this rhythmic sort of dance you can go into. Your sort of efficiency really goes up, as in you don't have to double check angles of your planer passes, and you'll flip concaves and look at them, and after you put whatever 20 minutes in on a concave with a planer, you'll turn it and just look at it in the lights, turn the top light on or whatever, and it'll be exactly like what you wanted. There'll be no sort of, not much fix up to do. So, and then sort of if I can get to those states where I just try and stay in it for as long as I can, and it'll be like there'll be some blanks that I've cut lined up, and it's just really nice place to go into. Like you shut the door, and I'll either have a podcast or music, or sometimes nothing, but just it becomes really efficient and a really nice state to drop into, where it's like hours fly by, the boards come out better than I could imagine, and it's just this, it feels like it's just coming out through your hands or through the tool. It's just an extension of your hand, it's just really nice. It's a nice place for me to be, and that goes back to why I started checking the emails once a week, because even those outside interactions could send a warble through that state, So I was just sort of trying to like, okay, I've got to do that on Monday, but from Tuesday to Sunday or Saturday, I can be in this like flow state. And I've got my, veggie box delivered, and I've got my bread for the week, and get in this kind of like full meditative state where you can just make a curry, make some eggs in the morning, have the curry the rest of the week, and I can just like work and be uninterrupted. And that's where I'm seeing the best results, and these small little innovation, what I think are innovations that are coming through, So it's been a really nice place to go into, and it fucks off the outside world, because you need a break from that, your phone and media and the radio or whatever's coming down your channels. It's just good to get away from that for hours on end of a day, and then throw a surf in the afternoon. It's like, yeah, pretty good place to be in. As close as I'll
Yeah.
get to it, probably.
I wonder too if it's the phase that you're at in life, like where you've settled into the home purchase and things like that, where when you're in your 20s, it feels anxious just because so much of it is ahead of you. And then as you shift into your 30s and 40s and you actually check a couple of boxes that you actually don't have to worry about anymore, you can kind of, I don't know, stretch out into the space that you kind of already built for yourself. You just didn't fully occupy,
Yeah, and you've still got to work for that too. So there's this sort of like gratification of going into that space, getting there, and then coming out with an end result that can be sustainable and continue to fulfill your life, or
Yeah.
whatever you do. So it's, I mean, don't get me, it's not like I can drop into Zen state. It takes a while. I reckon it takes a while. It takes like 2 or 3 boards, and it kind of feels awkward sometimes. And then the boards are still coming out, but then it's just like I feel like it's just this natural thing that humanity's, designed your body to do, where it's like, all right, you got to do this thing. Here's the most efficient way to do it. Turn off your mind, let your hands do the thing. Just let it come through. You've got X amount of hours build up. You can just fucking do this thing and go do it. And there's sort of this mental shift thing that happens, which has been, yeah, it's been, I don't know. I sort of read some stuff about like when they talk about with pilots with like 10,000 hours, after
Mhm.
flying, and it's like they're the safest after that, or they've got it's sort of like becomes second nature to them. I feel like maybe I'd be getting close to 10,000 hours. I was trying to do the calculations on it, but I've never counted my board, so I couldn't remember. But I reckon over the longer now, 15 years since I first did my first one, I'd be getting up there. And I
Yeah.
reckon it's just like that motor, the hand-eye coordination, motor skill things gotten that way. So yeah, feel real lucky to actually have got enough time in the bay to designate myself to that space. So
Um, are you working exclusively with EPS at this point?
pretty much, yeah. I'll get uh, I'll get the raw block. I buy a raw block of it. It's 5 meters long, 1.2 meter high, 0.6 meter wide, and they'll cut it in half for me. So it ends up being about 2 blocks that are 8 foot long, and then I'll bring it down here in my trailer in a van, and then that's sort of that's about 20 boards. So I'll just sort of work through that block, and then yeah, it's just a really nice density EPS I've been working on with this factory that they produce production foam for housing insulation or building building supplies, but they can really dial in the densities of it. And I've been with them. They're actually a contact through George Greeno when we first started this, so they'd sort of were aware of doing some board foam, and yeah, I just really like the medium, and I've sort of just I do a few polyurethanes here and there just for friends if they've want just a cleary, but it's like yeah, probably 95% EPS.
Uh, what do you prefer about EPS over PU?
Um, I mean, it's not as workable at the end, the final stages. You can't, the gauze and some of the sandpapers can pull chunks and stuff, but I think for me, the, I guess that I can get a huge block of it, and I can cut my own rockers and I can repeat those rockers. And because it comes from a square, there's no sort of preconceived curves within it. It's not like a blank. It's not someone else's plug or anything like that. So I feel like I really had some luck and some little breakthroughs in my own stuff just from being able to change foils or like even eyeball rockers and turn them into a wood template and then cut it out and be like, that looks different. Like that's, I couldn't necessarily pull that from a blank plug because the distribution of foams wouldn't be there.
Mm.
So just the workability of it, and then the recycling aspect of it was huge. And then over time, I've just really gotten used to riding it. Prefer it. I don't use stringers. Um, use some wider laps with the glass. I really like epoxy for its durability and its molecular structure. And I don't know, I've just become accustomed to it now. It's been probably 7 years, 6 or 7 years, pretty much riding strictly EPS. So I do jump on poly every now and then, and it feels nostalgic. I grew up riding shortboards competitively with polyurethane and polyester foam, so I know that feeling. But I really like the epoxy, and I really like the EPS, and yeah, just basically, and being able to recycle it was like the cherry on top.
Gotcha. Yeah, for listeners, just for edification for listeners, EPS is 100% recyclable. I think they just break down the bead. It's made of small little beads, and so they can break down the bead and refuse it essentially into a new block.
Yeah, or they melt it. It's this big sort of low heat melter, and they can melt it down into these square little bricks of basically like an A grade plastic, and it can be turned into a lot of other things. It's turned
Yeah.
into down piping or roof guttering or anything that there can be like an A grade plastic used for. So it turns into this little commodity that at those foam suppliers they do on sell to you know other manufacturers in China or domestically. So it's kind of
And
cool. It's cool to see it.
an important detail for listeners though is that you have to have that EPS recycled. Like you have to
Yeah,
take it or have it picked up to be recycled because otherwise it ends up in a landfill and it doesn't break down.
and it's basically the worst form of plastic, especially after it goes through a planer because it's a microplastic that
Yeah.
big. Essentially, like making tons of microplastics. So you've got to be like really cautious of vacuum on your planer into vacuum bag, sealing, taking to the correct place. And only a few places do it in Australia, and a few are stopping to do it, which I find is crazy. So you've got to really source out a polystyrene recycling plant, and then they're happy to take it because it turns into money for them, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big thing, and I'm really excited about where EPS is going to. There's a crew in New Zealand, these young kind of engineer designer shaper guys. They're called Verde Surf, or Berdure. Have you seen those?
Yeah, they've reached out to me. I've spoken to them.
Yeah, and they're like cracking onto some like compostable EPS foam that they're getting, like big fish boxes that come in the fish markets, and they're pretty big celled EPS, but they can actually break them down with worms and compost situations. So I'm kind of excited to where all that could go, and I could tell you more about it. But yeah, I'm excited about the world of EPS. Looking forward.
So it sounds like the reasons why you originally started working for it weren't for its performance characteristics in the water, but that you obviously got used to surfing them and now you like how they surf as well. But it wasn't as if you hopped on an EPS one day and said, hey, this is a light bulb moment and this board works better, right?
No, not really, but it was this sort of like George was using it, Greeno was using it, um, similar for the same reasons that I have come to it now. Is like he had unique rockers, and he wanted to, for his guns, for his 9.8 guns. You know, he has essentially like 5 inches of nose lift in one end and half-inch in the tail rocker. So here's these like almost toboggan sled looking big wave gun rockers, which you just can't get out of 99% of the blanks, you know, unless you go to some huge stand-up paddleboard that's probably 15 foot by X amount, that they don't even really blow. So he was wanting to achieve his conceptual rockers, or his rockers for his guns, and he wanted to do it at home. And if he did strike on something that really worked, he wanted to be able to replicate it exactly via a hot wire. So that was his reason for using it, and he could do it in his backyard, and that's where we learned how to do it. When me and Andrew were going up there all the time, it's like he was doing it in his backyard, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to create my own rockers and live and work in my backyard, and it just made so much sense to me. And it's almost like that just totally outweighed the feel of poly versus EPS or whatever people go on about, because I mean, there's a feel there, but is it quantifiable? Who knows? Is it just mentally? Is it acoustically how the board sounds when you paddle? It's sort of this like shamanistic element of like the surfboard marketing world. But I just was like, well, I'm going that way. That way seems way better. And I'll just get used to the repercussions of like that, because that looks epic to me. And you can recycle it and make these sort of unique shapes from a square. It was just like, yeah, the feel of poly. I was like, that seems like archaic anyway. I'm cruising. I'm going that way.
How did you end up going stringerless?
They're just another step for me to put in, essentially. So, like, I'd have to cut the blank as a square. You know what the EPS blanks look like. You used to work with the blanks. I do have a stringer bow, a big hot wire, and drop it through the middle, cut it directly down the middle, and then glue up another stringer. And I just have got used to not using them, and I haven't had any durability issues. I haven't had any. I've probably broken 2 boards in the last 7 years.
Wow.
Like, and that was like riding a board. The other one I rode was probably for 5 years before it broke, and it was in like a pretty heavy beach break where any board would have broken. So it was just this sort of, I don't know. I feel like I sort of use as far as stringers, like they're a shaping aid too, as much as they're a durability thing. They're a shaping aid for someone to line up the template on, or for when you put it through the racks, it gives it strength. So when you run your planer over, it doesn't jump up and down over the stands. And I've sort of been able to counteract that by using a bit of like boating technology and building individual strong backs, they're called, which sit between my racks, which are an exact mimic of the bottom curve and the deck curve. So when I put my blank on, it has that strong back to rest on. Just like when they, when they build a ship or anything, they build the bottom, they build the bottom of the hull, and then they build off it.
Yep.
So I just cut some strong backs, which was the George idea. He does it a little differently, but I just cut some strong backs that are the negative out of foam, and then shape them to fit in my stands. And then I have, essentially like a string is there when I'm shaping it, but when I take it away, it's not there. And yeah, I've really gotten used to that, because the strong back itself too is so rigid. So when you get up in the really fine noses of your boards, you can really push in with the planer or get those correct cuts. You're not having to sort of pussyfoot it out the end. You're sort of just being able to charge through on like a really nice cut without the foam bending away or dropping away. So that's been a bit of a plus that's come out of no stringers. And then again, a feel thing. Like once you put some glass on it, put some pigment or spray paint, you don't see the stringer. So your mind doesn't think like, oh, this board doesn't have a stringer, it's going to break. Just like drops away.
Beyond the structural element, people do talk about, a torsional flex, whether they feel it or they're just, presuming that that's a thing. But do you not identify any difference there?
It's so minute and such a variable that between the fins and the contours that I've got going on, and even the way that some of the contours are heavily corrugated in my rails, like that might be adding to stiffening the board or all these factors. It's just something I'm not thinking about,
Yeah.
As tech as I like to design, it's something I'm just like, I can't quantify that between all the bottom of my board and the fins. It's just like, that's just one thing that can just... I've seen some machines people are making lately where you use suction caps and they're twisting their boards and they can test the boards. There's a guy down in Sydney doing it somewhere, I think. But yeah, sort of not getting too caught up in that nitty gritty.
What's the traditional lamination that you're doing now?
We're pretty much just doing basically like a 6-4 deck, 6-4 bottom.
Okay.
Yeah,
so strong.
Strong, pretty wide laps, but light, still performance based. Ryan McDonald, I've worked with Ryan since I was 22, 21 maybe. He glasses under Loyal Glass, but he's a second generation board builder as well. His dad Kenny McDonald had his own label through the 70s and 80s, and they work together at their house up near the Gold Coast. They work underneath their house in a little small factory, and Ryan's just been into EPS and epoxy for years now. He did some of Slater's boards when he'd come out for the Quicksilver Pro back in the day, and some of the early Tomos and stuff he was doing, and some of the Fireways and stuff. So he was just sort of like this younger glass. So he's a bit older than me, but he was just sort of pretty tech. He was always into that sort of pushing forward with EPS and epoxy, and he's just, we've just worked together for so long now that I'm like, we need them strong, but we need them light. And between the foam density I'm using and then the no stringer, because that weighs a fair bit, plus the extra glass, they equal out. They're really similar, to what I want them to feel like, both performance, but both with a bit of inertia and a bit of momentum. So yeah, we worked together for so long now. It's just, I don't have to think about that either. He just, he sands them, dials them in, does everything, puts the fins in. It's just me and him. So it's really easy to circle back on design. And like I shaped him a board last week, and he's a really good surfer. So he's out there, like, I'm pretty sure he'd be glass by now. I dropped it off on Friday. He'd have it in the water already, like trying it out. He's into it. So it's cool.
I want to detail one of your designs, and so I picked the light kite. Can you break down the light kite as a design?
Yeah, that was just sort of a continuation of basically edge board pursuits that had been introduced by George. I'd done a lot of single fins and power blade fins, and I was doing a lot of heavily contoured boards with his edge design. For the listeners, it's sort of like a rail V that's heavily concaved out into another concave, into a double, into a V. The board's got a complex bottom, and it's a lot of about the design is releasing water off the bottom of the hull. And I'd sort of been surfing a lot of them, but then was sort of yearning to go back and try some multi-fin setups and go back to maybe creating a bit more of a passive design for the multi-fins, like not having so many edges and so much stuff going on at the front end. And basically sort of just went down this rabbit hole of reducing the nose area. It's sort of got a slight diamond, and basically kind of going back to some sort of performance surfing, but with sort of a more productive hull, like edgeboard. It's got edgeboard like concepts, but it's sort of a little more got a little more triplane in it, and it's got quad fins basically.
But it's short, right?
Short, yeah, they're pretty short. I'm 5'7", 5'8" on a good day, so I'm riding about 5'5",
Yeah.
so it's shorter than me. Short, wide, lots of planing area. There's a chine in the nose that actually starts up convex essentially, and then flips in through the board into concave. So it's got this sort of parabolic chine that actually spins throughout the outline. It's got pretty heavily concaved, and they're flying. I've got some volume distribution, so it's almost got like an S deck through the whole thing. There's lots of foam kept behind your back foot, almost right to the tail before it sort of steeps down quite quick. It was sort of just a reaction to riding smaller waves around here. Where I've moved is a bit further south, and we don't get a lot of the bigger south swells that hit up the eastern cape. So I was surfing a lot of smaller waves, and it's just sort of been a reaction to that environment. But then I don't know, the design sort of, I've put into some bigger boards now, and I'm starting to scale it up again, and still have that feeling of a light kite, but being able to put into like a few more different outlines. And I don't know, still always working on it, but so far it's feeling good.
It looks radical. It looks unlike almost anything that I've seen. And it looks fast, but how rippable is it? Does it go vertical?
It can go vertical, yeah.
Okay.
I only put out clips where I do fucking cutbacks, but I'm gonna try and either surf it or get someone on it. And I've been surfing with, I've got a small little group of friends that I'm sort of like leak these designs out to, and they give me feedback. And recently a couple of them have been over to Indonesia and stuff. So yeah, it can go vertical. Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
It's actually, the way the design is same as the edgeboard. There's actually 3 different rockers in it. So the chined first rocker is a lot lower. The rail line's elevated in the nose. So the rail line actually has more rocker, and then the center concave is another flatter rocker that exists inside it. So when you do go on rail, you've got the elevated rail line from the chine, and that essentially is a modern rocker. If you were to measure it up, it's really pretty modern. It's sort of that 4.5 in the nose, and then 2.25, 2.5 in the tail. So there is a modern rocker that exists in that board, but when you're planing or trimming, you've got a sort of lower, flatter rocker through the core. So if you want to go there, if you want to rip it, you can. But if you just want to like fly along the face and trim around, you can too, because there's different planing surfaces you can activate.
Gotcha. Can you explain? I know it's quad fin setup, but can you explain the shape of the fins?
Yeah, the shape. I sort of started working with the guys from Hanalei Fins. Robin Mayer, I don't know too much about him, but he lives in Kauai. I think he was a sailboarder and a surfer through the 70s and 80s. But a crew out here in Australia have sort of taken on the licensing from him. They're called Sanded Australia, and they're basically a supplier. They're like a Foam Easy, they got supply resin and supply glass, and they do a lot of flax and basalt and stuff like that. But they took on the distribution for Hanalei out here, and they were just really interesting fins to me. I'd sort of when I lived up in Byron, I worked in a kneeboard factory, Dave Parks's kneeboard factory, and he always was riding Hanalei fins, and he had this like and a lot of the kneeboarders were, and they were always quads, and I was always looking at them just like, that is such a nice looking fin design. It sort of has this, I feel like they look like the sail of a Hobie cat or something, or a
Mm-hmm.
like nice curve to them. They have that like sort of organic, sort of like biomimetic, natural curve to them. They don't have the rake and the sort of switchback like a dolphin fin. They're sort of more of a, maybe like a Spitfire wing if you tilted it that way, something like that for the listeners. But they also had this really interesting inside concave, which I always thought was amazing. So they've got this like nice sort of aerofoil on the outside, and then this inside pretty accentuated fin concave. And there was just a set sitting at in the surf shop where next to where I used to work down in Ballina at Locomotion. There was a set sitting in the racks there that hadn't sold in years. It was just on the wall, and I'd always walk past them, and I was like, "Fuck it, I'm just gonna try these fins." Like, and they just blew my head off. I just took them out, and they were in. I had this little board marked up that was one of Ryan's, my glasses, and he put his favorite quad fin placement, which was quite clustered, and they were just so fast off the get go, and they had this nice like pivot to them, but then they had this nice sort of flighty glide to them, and they just felt really, really sparky. And yeah, the initial, I don't know if it was the concave inside foil, the initial pump you sort of do to get speed on a wave, which just had this like, I don't know, freshness that I hadn't felt in a long time. And then yeah, I just sort of started working with them, and they really complemented the kites at the time, because the kites outline is, it's a quite wider tail, and initially the first ones were thrusters, but the tail was so wide I was sort of having trouble with the thruster, and then putting that quad fin set up with all that area just made so much sense. And yeah, they've just sort of, the Sanded guys have really started to push into the foils, and they're doing some ones now that are, they're upright, but then the tip has like a flip that goes out like an aeroplane wing, and I don't know, it just seems so refreshing in the, I'm just
So
so into it at the moment.
are the front fins or the outside fins bigger?
Yeah, front fins are bigger,
Gotcha.
um, and the rear fins are smaller. And front fins are, I'm towing them at a quarter, and then the rears I tow at an eighth.
Got it.
And yeah, they're like, as far as like the height of the fins is traditional. It's just sort of the outline that's changed in the concaves. But they're just feeling, I don't know, I'm so jazzed on fins at the moment, and Analay seem like they're just putting out something different, because I feel like the fin market's just, for the most part, just looks the same to me. So it's just like, I always like trying new stuff, and yeah, it just feels like it feels like the future to me, actually, those fins.
So
Pretty cool.
do a set of fins come with a board purchase? Because it'd be hard for somebody to source the right set. Okay,
Yeah, I kind of always
good.
do. I like that. Like, I'd be pretty bummed if you got a board and you didn't have the fins to go with,
Yeah.
It's kind of, that's my design idea. So it's a good starting point. If someone wants to put their favorite quads in there, though, like, go for it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
leaving it to chance really does the board a disservice too.
So much the fins, the boards are so dominated by the fins. Like, I feel like that's my whole ethos with design or whatever is basically offsetting the fins, because they're so,
Interesting.
so dominant. So it's like, if I'm going to stick 4 fins back there with that X amount of surface area, like, I'm going to need to make the front of the hull of the board a little more passive, because I don't want those two designs to fight. I don't want those two control inputs to fight on the bottom of the board.
Right.
Or if I'm sticking one fin back there, I want a heavily contoured forward hull, or a heavily contoured board at the front, because I want that hull of the board to be working in unison with the fin. So it's just always this balance of, like, that's what I feel like I'm doing every time I shape, is like, what fins, what conditions, and then like, how am I going to offset these two ingredients so that they work
Yeah.
harmoniously. It's like, that's,
Uh, does your dad have very many of the boards from his early days of shaping?
yeah. Well, he doesn't have too many. but I've been collecting them over the years.
Okay.
They come up on like, like those Facebook Marketplace pages sometimes, and people send them to me. So I've managed to get like maybe about 4 or 5 of these early ones from maybe 71 to sort of 75. These sort of like stingers, a couple like classic sort of winged swallow single fins and twins. And then he kept a couple through the 80s, which are like, he was doing some big stuff with concave back then and crazy stuff that we're sort of working towards on now that I don't want to say anything about, but I want to go back and look at those designs with him. But yeah, he's got a couple, probably got 10 or 15 to look back as a bit of a catalog, which is so cool because you can see his progression, and then you put it next to my early clunkers to now, and it's just they've got these same sort of highs or same sort of lows or same sort of funny little like nuances that are come through maybe the way he taught me. I don't know, it's so weird.
I mean, what a cool thing though to be able to compare side by side.
Yeah.
And also, you could imagine you refer to yours as early clunkers, so I could imagine you wanting to get away from those as quick as possible and not want to collect them in the early days. But the older you get, the more important it is to have kept those.
Every day I'm like, it gets more important to me. It's so weird. It's like I saw a Nolan Hall just did an art show, I think, over in California, and Nolan's always got a couple of boards off me, and he had this really early one that I did a show in Encinitas with, and I was like, it's probably in the top 50 boards or whatever, 30 boards, and he had it in the show just in the corner, and it's all, he rode it to death. It's all banged up and waterlogged. It looks like it's a fucking board from the 70s already.
Wow.
But I was like, oh, and Troy Elmore hit me up and he's like, dude, that board was sick. I hadn't seen that one before. And I was like, fuck, I want to look at that board. Like, I want to just hold it and be like, it'd probably be like that, one rail this, one rail that. And I'd be like, because I'd probably go straight back to where I was, when you shape it, you probably, I remember this. I was like on this trip and I got wiped out on this wave or something. I don't know.
That's so funny. And it's actually okay if you don't own it in your possession, but just to know where it is and who has it is kind of cool.
Yeah. And sometimes they pop up and someone's like, oh, I found this board and I really like it. And you're like, oh, that thing's a dog. Like, I know that's a dog, but they're like frothing on it somewhere. And they're just like, yeah, it's my favorite board. It's so cool. And I'm like, well, not favorite board, but I'm like enjoying it. And I'm like, oh God, that board's terrible. I know it is. Like, it's just funny. Like, life gets thrown in the face.
You could probably relate to that too, because I have boards that I'm sure the shaper, thinks are terrible, but worked amazingly for me at that time in my life for my surfing.
Totally. Yeah.
So it's really.
Yeah, sometimes it feels like an old photo with a bad haircut too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird the way that all works. How often are you riding other shaper surfboards at this point?
Not very, because the sort of shapers that I would ride or like I've been talking with about design sort of live geographically. Like I'm far away now. My sort of best friend Bo Foster, he's living down in Victoria, so I haven't really had a chance to ride many of his boards. But he's working with Sharma Buttonshaw, who's another like friend of mine. I've got a Sharma in my quiver. I've got one of his SB twins, and he brought one board up to stay with me, and it was like his personal board, and it was this sort of like foiled out little kind of high performance board, but with a twin fin, and it ripped. And I was like, fuck, you got to make me one of those. Like that board, I felt like I was like back in the Australian Junior Series in my prime. like let me get one of those. And he made another one and kind of beefed up for me a bit, and it didn't, because he's a pretty light guy. It didn't work as well, but I've still got it in my quiver and still like pull it out all the time. But actually, and then sometimes I was working next to Gunter Ron in the shaping bay next to him at Local Motion in Ballina, and he had a lot of old guns sort of from the early 90s, like late 80s, which I really like that period of thruster design. Sort of this hard tucked edge. you know, 2 5/8, 2 3/4, like thicker guns, but still had like what was becoming a pretty modern rocker and stuff like that. So I rode a lot of Gunter's guns at Lennox, which I really liked. And I mean, I'll jump on any board, you know. Still got Bonzes in there that I got from Malcolm Campbell like 10 years ago that I'll pull out and wax up. Not biased. And you always learn something from like the Gunter guns. They were just the insane thing I learned about that was how nimble he can make like a big board feel. You know, you can just download so much of that information from his like history of making all those boards, and his fin placement just always felt so spot on with longer boards. So just so good to learn from that stuff.
Speaking of Greeno, did you ever pass along to him those episodes of the podcast?
He just got a phone. It's so funny you said that. I didn't. He doesn't have a computer. He doesn't have a USB way to play. He's got a radio like from the 70s. But he got a phone recently, and he's all jazzed on his phone. He's just like, yeah, he's like, well, not jazzed, but you can call him, and he's got it on him, so in case he like, you know, needs to use it. And then, but he the other day he was like, I'm gonna get the iPhone 14. He's like, I could take a 45 megapixel photo and send it straight to the Surface Journal. And I'm like, you could do that. So, and then I was talking, I was like, oh, there's these podcasts, George, like I should try and get you like the app or download some of them to your phone. Cause he does listen, you know, he loves reading all the media and listen to the local radio. So like, yeah, I slowly I know he'd love, you know, the one with Dick Metz or the Pesman ones or all the Palmer ones, like, you know, all of them, or he'd be into it. So I've just got to, I don't want to up-tech him too much. I don't want to bomb him Spotify and just ruin his fucking life. So I just want to like somehow get him on his phone, you know, like a voice memo or something like that.
That's exactly where this conversation started. It's like you don't want to actually infect him with the modern world because he's such a unique gem, you know?
Yeah. But I can send him photos now. It was the point where I was like, he can open photos. So like you'll talk to him and then I'm like, I'll send you a couple photos, and then he can go over the photos and you chat back again. And it's like, he's like, I saw that photo. So it works for me because I'm a couple of hours away now. So it's like, yeah, I can send him sort of like what I've been up to, and he'll have little inputs or just kind of keep it, I don't know, keep close to the guy, you know, so love him. So I just got to like keep in the loop.
Absolutely. Coming back to your business, it looks like you've set up a bunch of retail accounts.
A couple, yeah. Nothing that I like. I've got Chris Gentile at Pilgrims. He's always been a supporter. I spent some time over there maybe 10 years ago now and shaped a batch of boards for him at Joe Falcone's spot in Rockaway Beach. I spent like 10 days out there and went and stayed with Joey Falcone, who's a local shaper, but I stayed with his Italian mum out in Rockaway and shaped a few boards in his garage for Pilgrims. And then, yeah, they've always sort of supported me. And then Nick from Thalia Street in Laguna, yeah, Nick's been a great supporter, and they pick up boards every now and then. And then basically, I'm not forgetting anyone. There's a shop in Australia now I'm doing some boards for, Keel Surf Supply, Jason there. And then my Japan stuff through Ride Surf and Sport. But yeah, not a whole lot. I mean, 4 shops probably around the world.
It's nice though. I like that, you know, listeners who are interested in your boards, they can go pick one up immediately rather than having to go through the custom process and wait for it to be shipped and all that sort of stuff. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, and it's been interesting in the way that back to that supply thing and not doing too many when you get the boom, like that's about as much as I could facilitate too, you know. I'm not out owns boards and whatever, and so it's like it's almost on this nice sort of cycle. When they sell out, it's like it's about time to do another batch for them, and then it's, you know, and then the summer comes on here and then winter comes on here. I feel like this is this really like not like unthought about, but sort of cycle that goes on with enough people that are into my stuff and whatever, and it just can like have this really nice pace to it where I'm not like, can you guys take 20 boards? Like I'm broke right now. Or it's like they're like, hey, we need the boards. Like we need 20 boards like yesterday. It's just sort of like when I can come up with them is like organically about when they need them. That makes any
Perfect.
sense. Yeah.
It does. And it's also, there's great retailers now. Like the ones that you're working with, they're conscientious. They know design. They can communicate what's what to the consumer. So they're a great partner essentially to have.
And a lot of them are, I mean, all of them are just heavy board focused, you know, and beautiful
Totally.
stuff. It's like over 50% surfboards, you know. So that's a huge thing too. It's just like they're supporting me, but they're supporting other guys around the world, supporting a lot, mostly independent guys too, which is cool, you know, like even and young guys like Chris is in Pilgrim's given Bo a start and given Sharma, you know, some rack space and like, which is, you know, they're just Aussie guys sending boards all the way over the east coast of America, and he's like supporting me in that way. So it's cool. They support us, and we support them, and it's like, yeah, I love going in there. I mean, I love surf shops. I've always loved them, you know. And it's so cool how some of those surf shops have gone, and they're just like they're like a cultural meeting point for people in the city. Or I mean, Nick's Thalia Street's been there for so long and done like movie premieres there, and I don't know, he's done so much stuff there for that community. It's cool, yeah. Just I don't know, I'm just lucky,
Well,
I guess.
when you think about Pilgrim, specifically in New York, like had a different retailer been there, New York surf culture would be totally different. Like if you
Mm.
had a retailer there that was focused on pointy thrusters, that New York surf scene would look entirely different than it does now. But as a result of Chris and his work through Pilgrim, it's like there's a freaking hip, super cool scene.
Yeah, yeah, and it didn't go too fashion either. You know, I mean, they have
No.
their that beautiful clothes and stuff, but it's like it's so core surf there still in a way. It's
Yeah.
yeah, they support like Charles Mansell. I think you did a podcast with Charles. Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris are really tight, and Joey Falcone out there who does like beautiful handshake boards, and still those guys who still got that connection to the coast. But he just sort of brings it into the city. It's pretty. It would kind of blew me away when I went out there. Actually, like I've been out there a few times, and it's just like I don't know, it just caught me off guard. And the waves they get out there too. They got so many good waves sometimes. Like
Yeah.
I got amazing waves in New Jersey in April, like A-frame peaks. You know, it's like got Rockaway really fun. I've had out Montauk and Ditch Plains and that, like great for longboards and stuff. Such a cool little area to surf around.
It really is. Um, what surf media do you follow at this point?
I'm subscribed to the journal always. Um, that's just been like forever kind of thing with dad, and then I just sort of continued the subscription on, and then just looking around. Oh, I got the Sean Doherty this and um, why am I
John
forgetting?
Frank?
Frankie, yeah, John Frank, Surfing World, and then I've got you. You're another paid subscription, $5 a month, and I've got. That's about it, actually. That's heaps.
Do
And then
you
I've got.
do you watch any WSL, anything?
No, I don't anymore. I see the highlights come up. My dad watches a lot of it. He sort of gives me a bit of the breakdown, but no, I've lost a bit of. Like, I don't have the time for it. But nah, a lot of those guys, I don't know. Yeah, just I did watch it sort of more maybe a couple of years ago when I guess like Julian and Owen were on it a bit more, just maybe because I sort of grew up competing with them a bit and it was a bit more interesting. But it's just sort of changed a bit. I don't know. It's just the lack of diversity and stuff in the boards and the surfing. It's just kind of like I don't know. I just haven't watched it in ages. Actually, I didn't even. Was Chopu on the other week or something? Or,
Yeah.
I saw that. I saw, or no, I saw one of Jack Robinson's wave or something, but that was like about it. I was like, oh, Chopu's on.
Yeah, he won the event.
Oh, okay. I was still stuck at J-Bay. I heard Ewing. Oh, George said Ewing hurt his back.
Yeah, he broke his back at Chopu in the warm-ups. I think he broke 2 vertebrae.
Oh, that's heavy.
Yeah. And he's in like the final 5, so he gets to surf in the final day at lowers, but he hasn't withdrawn from the event yet. I think he's rehabbing and he's back in the water, so hopefully he'll be in shape to surf at lowers. I think it's on the 8th, so in about a week.
Oh god.
Yeah.
That's heavy. The gnarly one, gnarly wipeout.
It just looked like a normal wipeout at Chopu, you know? Like he didn't get like pitched over the falls, or like the lip didn't hit him in the back. He was just pulled into the tube and disappeared in the tube. So who's surfing do you admire currently?
Um, I'm really liking. I'm good friends with Jaleesa Vincent. She's a girl surfer around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jaleesa's like, she sort of moved down from the Sunshine Coast into a house I was renting a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. So I really like Jaleesa surfing. We're making a few boards together. I've been making her some boards for the last couple of years. So we've just been sort of having this like fun little surfer shaper surfing relationship. So I've been watching her a lot and like trying to figure out boards for her and her sort of style. She's very like back footed and kind of plants her back foot and sort of she's got power. She's got a frontside layback and a nice sort of backside hook. So yeah, I've been really liking her surfing, and she's doing airs now and stuff. It's so cool to see where like the girls' progression's going. And she's sort of put me on to Katie Simmers too, so I've been watching her a bit, which is cool. My sister surfed and stuff too, so I always loved, and my mom, so I always loved like women surfing. Yeah, so I've been lucky to work with Jaleesa, and then just my friends like Creed, like Taggart and Noah, Dean and Bo Foster, and what Sharma's doing, and with his bigger gliders and stuff out Bells. And I'm sort of still make some boards for Credo here and there, and we're sort of always talking about design. So it's probably just that like little tight circle that I'm looking at right now. And then as far as like international people, I was watching that. I'm so bad with the names. Victor, he rides for Caton now in the States.
Victor Bernardo.
Yeah, I was watching his surf and I liked his sort of flow. He's got this cool like almost front hand current thing when he takes off and he looks straight down the nose and then does these like pretty powerful bottom turns. I was liking that little bit of jazz. And then I watched Bryce's movie the other day after I listened to your podcast. Yeah, and that was like those first couple sections or whatever it was were just like, I've seen Bryce surfing over the years. I mean, he was Gary and I was Byron, so we'd always surf in the like little regional events. But I knew how good he was. But some of those, whatever those turns are called, if they've got a name for them, the pendulum layback effect thing that he's got going, it was just like, yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then on to Birch too. I'll see whenever Birch decides to put out one fucked up clip, I'll watch that and be inspired by it.
Yeah, I mean the Bryce Birch combo, I think, is a real big unlock. It's like Bryce wasn't accessing that surfing without those boards, and I think I think Birch's boards are going in new places under Bryce's feet.
Yeah. I was sort of watching that when it happened, and I remember talking to Bryce, and I think he was talking about with you where he's like, he'd had that quiver and then he just surfed the shit out of it, and he was just like, I need to start making my own or ding fixing these ones, and he was like needing Birch to come back over and shape another quiver. But kind of could see that like sporadically, just if you're up north, you go down to Angari when there's like an east southeast swell and surf, so you'd see Bryce out there. But it was, yeah, like whatever that turn is and how fast it's happening, it hasn't happened before like that.
No.
The amount of changes and like hold, glide, slide, hold, around squirt. Like that hasn't happened in boards yet, or in surfing or whatever, you know. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, I like looking at the board stuff, you know. I like looking at, I wish them, I mean, that was a fair bit of slow-mo, but it's like if you could just slow-mo and like zoom in on like knee down and somehow get the camera to like stabilize on that, it's just so cool to see, especially with all the tech, like nice high definition footage. It's so cool to see what the board's doing, and like his board's going like that and he's surfing it. You know, it was like a couple of those airs and then the floaters where he's come down, the whole thing's like, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know what to make of it, but just try and absorb it, I guess, and it'll come out later.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
Final question is just, what was the last surfboard that you rode?
We've got really early spring conditions right now. It's dry and northerly, so I've been on my 4th gear flyer mat by Paul Grove.
Wow.
Yeah, air mattress. Yeah, it's dribble. I've been riding the mat for years, and I think it's the most lightest high performance little vessel you can get in the water. So I had heaps of fun on that and learned more things from that than I've learned from any other board, I reckon.
What's high performance about it?
It's got variable rocker, variable rail shape, variable bottom shape, and it weighs about 300 grams. So it just likes it anything. And I once rode it at J Bay with a GPS with a GoPro strapped to my chest, and it hit 47 k's an hour.
No way. Holy cow.
Like down at Super Tubes there, went high, and then just before it started to close out, just sort of gassed the spine and sort of just pressurized the inside rail and twisted it and got it up on sort of one pontoon, and the little speedometer and the GPS had like a little rev tacho on the thing, and it's like 35, then it just goes and got up to 47. Then I just like rush out front and got the lip. So I was just like, that's it. That's
insane.
Yeah.
I could see people wanting to burn you so bad on that thing, and then like before they even know it, you're just passing them by.
You ever watch those clips? There's a guy in Rincon, I think it's like ASL Buck or something, his Instagram, but he's just knocking people's shins out. They're dropping him and they're just like, it's awesome. There's just longboards going, he's just like, bang! There's this little pillow and they're just going over it. It's just so good. I love that stuff.
You can't even be mad at him. I mean, if you're one of the surfers, you just have to laugh at that.
I'm just perplexed. It is blown, you know. They can't even like comprehend what happened. They just laugh at this guy on an inflated bag of breath, just knocking him out.
Exactly. It's so funny. My mom just got back with the little boy.
Oh, you're on.
She's babysitting him for the day for us outside of the house so we can get some work done.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's phenomenal to catch up with you, man.
Yeah, you too, Dave. I'll be out the States next year. I'm going to come over and do some boards because just catch Nick and all that.
Where are you going to work out of?
I'll probably be in like Coast Mesa area. I'll probably work with Jay at Pure Glass maybe, and not Pure Glass, at Golden State, and yeah, just want to catch up with everyone, and a couple of boards, and try and get back traveling again because it's been a bit.
Perfect. Yeah, we are. This is Austin. Hey, can you come say? And our dog. You want to come say hi? Come here. Come here. You see this guy right here? Let's go say hi.
Man, he's grown up so quick.
I know. Come here. You got to stand on this side. Here, let me lift you up. He's almost 2 years old now.
Yeah.
Can you say hi?
No.
Yeah, you can. Say hi. He doesn't do anything on command.
No,
at any rate, Costa Mesa, I'm like 20 minutes from there, so we'll definitely link up when you're in town.
I'll bring a black kite out, give you a go, or get you on.
I would love to.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Cool, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.